Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, an insane neighbor claimed that I violated her human rights because I did not allow her kids to swim in my pool, despite constantly trespassing on my property. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is a malicious compliance story. It was 2023 and I was working at a big box retailer. I should mention that I was a pretty reliable employee. I was never late, often got in early and rarely called in sick. In fact, the last time I had called in sick was almost a year ago, and even then my manager had sent me home. This particular day I had been up all night feeling absolutely miserable. I was burning up with a fever and could not stop throwing up. At one point around 2 AM I was in the bathroom, head in the sink, just completely wiped out. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew, it was 7 AM and I was supposed to start my shift at noon. There was no way I could make it in. I called my manager, let's call him Jack, and Jack was known for being a real jerk. He never believed anyone who called in sick unless they were one of his buddies, usually other managers. But he had no problem calling out himself, often because he was hungover. The conversation went something like this. Me, hey Jack, I'm really sorry but I cannot come in today. I'm sick, I've been up all night throwing up and I have a high fever. Jack, what is wrong with you? If you had the flu, you would be knocked out. I need you here. Come in or you're fired. Me, I can't. I just told you I'm throwing up and I almost passed out earlier. I really cannot come in today. Jack angrily, either you come in or bring a doctor's note or you're done. I knew that in my state, employees are legally allowed to self-certify for up to 5 days of sick leave. You don't need a doctor's note for that, but I was terrified of losing my job during these tough economic times. So then I forced myself to get dressed and dragged myself to the doctor's office, which was about a 25-minute walk away. When I got to the doctor's office, the doctor could see how ill I really was. She was actually upset that I had even come in, explaining that for a basic flu or cold I should have just stayed home to rest. But I told her about Jack's threat to fire me if I did not bring a note. The doctor got really angry at that. She asked if I got paid sick leave and I said yes. Well then, I will give him a note, she said, and boy did she give him one. Instead of just a simple note confirming I was sick, the doctor wrote up this epic 2-week excuse slip. It basically said that by forcing me to come in while so ill, I had now strained myself and would need a full 2 weeks to recover rather than just a few days. She cited my high fever and how I had almost passed out in a waiting room. The doctor said this was the longest she could sign me off without requiring further evidence. I headed back to work and one of the other managers, let's call her Sarah, saw me and immediately told me to go home because I looked terrible. She accompanied me to Jack's office and I handed him the note. He looked really worried and tried to backtrack, saying that he did not mean to threaten firing me. But Sarah was not having it. She said she was driving me home to rest and then went back to inform our union rep about the whole incident. Jack ended up getting a serious disciplinary warning and had to work overtime to cover my shifts while I was out for those 2 full weeks, all paid, of course. I ended up enjoying that nice unexpected vacation while Jack had to deal with the consequences of his callous behavior. Needless to say, he was a lot more lenient about sick days after that. And yeah, Ripe stars, that was absolutely beautifully done by OP and the doctor. Props to both of them. And if you enjoy the malicious compliance stories, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and maybe even like the video. Thank you so much. The next one is the title story and it's titled Neighbor Karen Calls Cops When I Won't Let Her Kids Swim in My Pool. Moving into a new neighborhood has been a dream come true for me. The quiet streets, friendly faces and a house with a large backyard that I turned into my personal oasis with a beautiful swimming pool. Little did I know that my dream home would become the battleground for a bizarre conflict with my neighbor Karen. It all started on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I was lounging by my pool, enjoying the tranquility of my new surroundings when I heard the unmistakable voice of Karen calling out to me from over the side fence. "Hey, you there!" she shouted, marching over with a sense of entitlement that sent a chill down my spine. The kind of dread ever so rarely felt. I greeted her with a friendly smile, thinking she might want to chat about the neighborhood, maybe a glorious greeting for her to offer given I was still settling in. Oh, if only it was that simple. How wrong I was. "Listen, I need you to let my kids swim in your pool," Karen demanded, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "It's a hot day and they've got nowhere else to go. Don't be selfish, let them have a good time as well." I was taken aback, surprise evident in my voice. "Oh sorry, but this is our private property." The pool is for our family's use only, I explained, hoping that you would understand as I attempted to ease the sudden and honestly confusing situation that was developing in my own yard. Karen's face contorted into an expression of pure rage. You cannot do that, you're violating our human rights. My kids deserve to swim whenever they want. What gives you the right to determine who can go where? She screeched. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Human rights? Really? Listen, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this is a private pool and we have the right to enjoy it without interference, I explained, maintaining a calm composure. Private property is private for a reason. Karen huffed. You leave me no choice. I'm calling the cops on you, she exclaimed in a sudden and needless escalation of the situation. I stared at her for a solid minute, unable to even comprehend what I was hearing. I sighed though, thinking this was an overreaction, and all the same, I stood my ground. Well, go ahead, Karen, but they won't find anything illegal here. It's our property, as marked by deed and law. And true to her word, Karen stormed off to her own abode just across the street and dialed 911. As I waited for the police to arrive, I couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and disbelief. What had started as a peaceful day by the pool was turning into a bizarre confrontation with a neighbor I had not even lived in the house with my family for a week. What craziness was all this? It was unfathomable. When the police finally arrived, a black and white car that rolled up to my house, Karen must have told them my house number specifically, they quickly assessed the situation. Noting the boundaries of each individual house on the street, especially the fact that the pool in question, my pool, did indeed lay within my own garden, before eventually turning to Karen to speak with her. Ma'am, this is a civil matter, not a criminal one. You will need to sort this out with your neighbor, one of the two officers explained. Since no laws are being broken, we are unable to act. He is well within his rights. Karen's face turned even redder as she realized her plan had failed. She shot me a venomous look before stomping away, muttering about how unjust the world was. The two officers who had come to answer this call gave me a brief look. No words were spoken, the three of us immediately understood right and wrong in the confrontation. A nod was offered and they parted to return to other duties. As the day ended, I thought the drama was over and that I could finally begin to settle in and enjoy my family's new home. But I could not have been more wrong. The next day, after I returned home from work, I found myself in yet another confrontation over my new pool. Karen's kids were splashing around carefree in my backyard. There were cans of drinks idly bobbing along in the water beside them as they trashed and frolicked in my pool. Meanwhile, my fence, the one next to my driveway, showed signs of malicious tampering. Scratches across the white boards and even an entire plank section missing further to the back. Fury surged through me. How dare she trespass and vandalize my property? With rational anger and justified loathing, I stormed over to confront Karen, who was also lounging around in my backyard. It looked like she dragged one of her own chairs given the drag marks across my lawn. She had a glass in one hand while she read a book, lounging about in my backyard like she owned the place. Like she was utterly justified in being there despite the conclusion of yesterday's altercation. To say I was mad would have been an understatement. What's the meaning of this, Karen? I shouted, my frustration boiling over quite evidently. She smirked, an unsettling glint in her eyes. Consider it a lesson. You cannot keep my kids out of the pool. We have the right to be here. I don't care what those officers said. They were mistaken. My little ones cannot do anything wrong. Before I could respond, however, Karen made a hasty exit, calling her kids who floundered in my pool for a little while longer, before clambering out, leaving the array of litter and drinks floating in what was once my pristine pool. They hopped and hounded after Karen back across the street. She even left her chair behind. I could not believe the gall of this woman. I stood there in my backyard for a long time, just staring at the mess they had made, thinking the situation over. I couldn't believe it. How could she justify this? I spent the next hour or so cleaning up the pool, using a net to clear the remnants of rubbish Karen and her kids had left behind. The sky was glowing dark as I finished. The following day, fueled by a desire for justice, I decided to confront Karen about her actions and her blatant trespassing of my property, along with, most irritatingly so, her disregard over the entire situation. Karen, we need to talk about what happened. You cannot just trespass and vandalize my property, I said, trying to keep my tone calm, when I found her once again in my backyard preparing her dainty chair in the sun. She scoffed. You deserve it for trying to keep my kids away from the pool. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they can swim whenever they want. They've got a right to maintain a healthy lifestyle." She continued, "The fact that you would deny them, that speaks more on you than me." As our argument escalated and we got into a back and forth, me arguing that she cannot just trespass into other people's territory, while she argued for the well-being of her kids being above the law. Karen's frustration reached its peak, and in a shocking turn of events, she slapped me across the face right in front of her own children. Right in the middle of my own backyard. I was stunned, my cheeks stinging from the impact. I hesitated for a moment, my thoughts racing. What could I do? It was then that I decided to use a page from Karen's own book, and I reached for my phone to dial 911. "I need to report an assault. My neighbor just assaulted me on my own property." While waiting for the police to arrive, I paced while Karen threw glares my way. She was gathering her children together, coaching them on what to say to the police when they arrived. She wanted to have them say that I was in the wrong, the one who had assaulted Karen. It was then that I remembered the security cameras I had recently installed around the property. They had probably captured the entire altercation, providing irrefutable evidence of Karen's assault and the possibility to catch them in their own lies and deceptions. When the officers arrived, I showed them the video footage highlighting Karen's violent act. The atmosphere shifted as they realized the severity of the situation, as Karen realized her actions would finally have consequences. That she couldn't just act however she wanted. "You're pressing charges, right?" one of the officers asked. "Yes, absolutely," I thought, determined to see justice served. "Yes, I want to press charges for assault and vandalism." The security footage became the linchpin of the case. In court, the video was played for all to see, exposing Karen's aggressive behavior and undeniable guilt. A good thing as well, given without it, it would have been a case of I said, she said. One which could have gone wrong either way. I took the stand and recounted the events, describing how I had tried to peacefully resolve the dispute and how Karen had resorted to violence. The courtroom was silent as my testimony unfolded. I told them of the multiple times I tried to explain the situation to Karen, that it could all simply conclude with her keeping her children out of my yard to stop them from trespassing. However, even after the police agreed with my word, she insisted, and now here we are. Karen's defense, the web of lies she intended to spin about me and my actions, crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Her history of similar offenses only added to the severity of her actions. The judge had seen enough, and Karen was found guilty of assault and vandalism. In the end, justice prevailed. Karen was sentenced to jail time, a consequence of her repeated disregard for the law. As the courtroom cleared, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that this bizarre chapter in my life was finally coming to a close. Moving forward, I hope for a more peaceful and neighborly existence, free from the tumultuous events that had unfolded in my seemingly idyllic new neighborhood. As for Karen's children, they'd be looked after by her sister. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I am 38 and recently moved into a new house with my wife Amanda and two daughters Ellie and Hannah. Growing up, my family did not have enough money to live in anything more than a small apartment where we were cramped together and rarely got privacy. I have two older siblings, so space was a luxury we did not have. I ended up spending most of my time at the local YMCA or libraries in the area just to be able to get away for a while. Even if I was not doing the most entertaining thing in the world. Through that, I found that I have a love for swimming, and I started doing everything I could to have time in the water. I joined the water polo team when I got to high school and actually met my wife at a swimming camp I saved up money to go to. She did not pursue swimming the same way I did, but she still enjoys being in the water, especially if it is with me. I have done my best to get my girls interested in swimming, and they like playing in the water, but are not quite interested in competing, which I'm okay with. My wife and I have worked hard over the years so that we could pool together our money and buy a house. I had never lived in a house before because my parents were only able to afford one a few years after I went to college and then moved out. Since then, I've been living in various apartments with Amanda and the girls and dreamed about owning a house. We finally had enough to start seriously looking for one, and we probably went to 50 or so open houses in hopes that we would find one that called out to us. A lot of houses needed a lot of work done, and we were not quite ready to commit to that level of renovation, especially when we would already be paying a decent amount for the property itself. Some other places were in questionable neighborhoods that clearly had a lot of rambunctious people living in them, which was not exactly what we were looking for. We did find a few places that we liked, but they were out of our price range, so we had to pass them by for now. We went to one neighborhood that was fairly close to an elementary school and had a park nearby. It seemed like a nice place to live, so we were excited to check out the house that was currently for sale. It was a beautiful place that had clearly been renovated in the last few years, as it had a modern feel to it that many of the other houses did not have. There were enough bedrooms for each of us and a big kitchen that had a view of the living room, so we would be able to watch the girls play while making dinner. Ellie and Hannah were not exactly happy about the move, but even they thought this house would be fun to live in. One of the biggest positives for me was the pool in the backyard, as it was something I had always dreamed of having for almost my entire life. It all seemed too good to be true. The house was amazing and the neighborhood was perfect for raising kids, all the while being at an affordable price point. In hindsight, we should have been more suspicious about the whole thing, but had been optimistic that we had stumbled upon the deal of our lives. We put an offer in immediately and it didn't take long to hear back. There was a little negotiating and we made sure to have the house inspected before deciding anything, but soon enough we were the owners of a new house. Moving was a slow process, mostly because unpacking was a chore. We were not used to having so much space, so we didn't know where to put everything that we had while maintaining a cohesive look throughout the property. We did not quite have enough furniture to fill every room, but that did not stop the space from feeling new and exciting. The girls argued a bit over who would get which room, but they eventually came to an agreement that Ellie should get the first pick since she is older by a few years. Things were going well and we were excited about the future. We had a few people come by to welcome us to the neighborhood with homemade cookies or a nice houseplant to brighten the space, and it was so wonderful to have people around who wanted to get to know us. We heard about the best places to eat and different after-school activities for the girls to participate in, so we were feeling pretty good about this new area. The only people we really did not hear from were Rick and Karen that lived in the house directly to our left. There had been a few occasions when I waved to them, but I never got any type of response back, not even anything that would signify that they saw me. I did not feel like they were obligated to come over and greet us, but it was the first thing that implied something was wrong with them. The next thing that happened occurred one morning at about 10 AM when I was doing some yard work. The lawn had been neglected a bit while the house was up for sale, so it needed some care to get it back to looking beautiful, and I was mowing the lawn before heading off to work. I had specifically picked late morning so that I would not wake anyone up, but it wouldn't be so warm outside that mowing would be torturous to me. My lawnmower is not that loud compared to others, so I was sure it would be okay, but after working for a couple of minutes, Rick came outside and flagged me down. Me, hey, what can I do for you? Rick, do you mind? Me, I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. Your mower is obnoxious. Me, I'm sorry, did I wake you up? No, I've been awake since 6. I was trying to watch TV. Me, well, it'll just be a few more minutes and then it'll be quiet. Rick, can't you just do it some other time? It's not very respectful for you to be making so much noise and bothering everyone else in the area. Me, I understand, but I really need to get this done. He scoffed and walked back to his house, grumbling something under his breath the whole time until he disappeared behind the front door. I was at a bit of a loss for words because I hadn't been mowing for long enough to really get on anyone's nerves, and he had been fairly aggressive towards me. I initially chalked it up to him having a bad day and taking it out on me, so I tried to forget about it. There was a simple fence that separated our house from Rick and Karen's. It was not the nicest fence, but it seemed good enough, especially after first moving in. I spent a lot of my weekends swimming around in the pool, and I swear, I sometimes heard whispering coming from the other side of the fence or the occasional head peeking up from behind the fence. It was definitely unnerving, and I had brought it up with them once, but they just looked at me like I was crazy, so I dropped it. I did not actually believe that I was seeing things, but I was not interested in having any sort of confrontation with them, which led to me just ignoring it. The whole thing did make me hesitant to let Ellie and Hannah play in the backyard since I didn't like the idea of someone spying on them for any reason, but I kept a lookout when they played and that made me feel comfortable. I was at work one day when I got a call from Amanda, which is unusual. I was worried it was something about one of the girls, so I answered right away and she explained that her car had been blocked in the driveway by a number of other cars. She had to pick up the kids from school though and run some errands, but she couldn't get out of the driveway. She told me that she had waited nearly 2 hours, but the cars were still there and she was not sure what the best course of action was. Amanda is the type of person who doesn't want to make anyone upset or angry and feels terrible if she gets on someone's bad side, so she wanted me to help her make the best decision for the moment. I told her to call the tow company and have all the cars towed as they did not have permission to park on our property and we did not even know who the cars belonged to. She agreed and left to get all of her chores for the day done, and she felt pretty good about her decision later. I got home an hour or two later and I was helping with dinner when someone knocked on our door. I went to answer it and saw both Karen and Rick standing on our porch with an expression that told me that they were pissed off. Me, what seems to be the problem, sir? Karen, our cars were parked in your driveway earlier this afternoon and now they are gone. What did you do with them? Me, they were blocking my wife's car and she needed to get over to the school to pick up our kids, so she had them towed. Rick, couldn't your kids have just walked home? Me, maybe, but we prefer to pick them up just in case. Karen, well, why didn't she just ask us to move them? Me, she didn't know that they were your cars. You never mentioned that you were gonna park there, so how was she supposed to know? Karen, well, at least tell us where we go to get our cars. Me, I'm not sure, but I think the tow company will tell you if you give them a call. That ended the conversation, and I later learned that they called and found out the impound lot had closed for the night and they had to wait until the next morning to go get their vehicles. I think it cost a few $100s per car, so it was not a measly sum of cash. The following weekend, I was hanging around the house getting some chores done while Amanda and the kids were at the library for the afternoon. I was about to head out to the grocery store when I looked outside and saw 2 cars parked in the driveway once again and blocking my car in. I sighed and went over to the neighbor's house to ask them to move their cars. They should have been home since their cars were here, but no one came to the door no matter how much I knocked. I tried to call through the door and tell them that I would have to call the tow company again if they didn't move, but I did not get a response, so I went back to my own house and called the tow company. They thought it was pretty funny that they were getting the same call within a week of each other, because who in their right mind would make the same mistake and get their cars towed twice? Then I finally heard from Rick and Karen later that night when they started banging on my door so aggressively that the rest of my family was frightened. I opened the door and they began shouting about how I had their cars towed again for no good reason, despite us having arrived at an agreement. I told them that we never agreed on anything and they did not have permission to park on our property. It went back and forth for a while, but I was not backing down because I did not want their cars in my driveway at any point and I would have them towed as many times as I needed to. They eventually left, although I could tell that they were not very happy about everything. There were a couple of weeks where we didn't have any issues with them and we were hoping that they had decided to leave us alone, which was a relief. I was working from home one day so that I could take care of the girls while Amanda was on vacation, and I was in the office upstairs taking some calls when Ellie texted me. She wanted to see if I could come downstairs for a minute, but I was right in the middle of something and could not get out of it for a little while. I could hear sounds from the backyard, but I assumed it was either the girls playing or sounds coming from another yard. I got back to work and, after an hour or so, got up to see what the girls needed. They were sitting in the living room with confused looks on their faces, and I asked what the problem was. They explained that people were in our backyard and playing in our pool, and they did not know what to do, so they had waited for me to deal with it, which I told them was the right thing to do. I eventually went out there and asked what they were doing in my yard, to which they responded that the previous owners let them play in the pool on occasion. This struck me as a lie, but I didn't have any evidence to prove them wrong, so I reiterated that I did not want them on my property and I would appreciate if they left so I could go back to work. They were not budging though, and their kids were running all over the place. I looked around the yard for evidence of how they got in. We have a locked gate that is tall enough to be difficult to scale, and saw that pieces of wood from the fence were scattered along the ground. It looked like someone had taken an axe to it, and I wondered how they managed to do that without alerting me to what they were doing. I took a closer look and saw that some of the tiles around the pool had been damaged somehow and were cracked or broken, and I could not even imagine how had that happened, but I knew it was not me or anyone else in my family who had done that. I tried once again to get them to leave, but they were relentless, so I called the police and told them my neighbors were trespassing on my property. Rick and Karen made a big fuss when the authorities arrived, but I reminded them that I had asked them to leave multiple times, but they refused. I mentioned to the officers that part of the pool had been destroyed and I smashed up the fence separating our properties in order to get into my yard. The cops eventually found out that one of the posts of the fence could be moved, which is how they got into our yard. They were fined $100 for trespassing and had to pay for a new fence, which ended up costing a couple of $100s when you add the cost of the installation on top of the materials. However, the pool needed to be completely retiled, which they also paid for, and that ended up being around $15,000. We then found out that they were renting the property, and when their landlord found out what they had done, he swiftly evicted them without listening to their begging and promises to stop causing problems. Needless to say, we have not heard from them, and a new family moved in, and they've been polite and gracious to us. But seriously, I cannot say that I'm gonna miss Rick and Karen. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.